think with the adoption trends in 5G IoT, we have to think about it in three ways. There's effectively three legs to the stool of 5G IoT. One being massive machine type communications. There we're seeing some tremendous adoption around MBIoT for things like smart metering, and that will continue to grow. I think in terms of LTE-M, we talk to a lot of network operators about their strategies and their approach to the market, and some of them are talking about their new connections being 40% LTE-M. So we're seeing a tremendous adoption there. Now that's just one leg of the stool. The other one is the mobile broadband, the provision of just much greater capacity connectivity. There's some really interesting use cases in there. There's a lot of adoption in connected cars, some things around things like CCTV cameras. And the third one is around the ultra reliable low latency communications. And this for me is a very interesting one, but probably one where we haven't seen that much adoption yet. We've seen a bit in the context of private networks in factories and warehousing and so on, but I think that's where we'll see the interesting evolution coming in the next few years, but really there's not quite the application landscape to support it yet. So lots and lots in the massive machine type communications, some really interesting stuff happening in the broadband, but the low latency stuff, I think that's still to come, and some interesting stuff to come. I think if you think about the commercial models for 5G IoT, you can look at, first off, the massive machine type communications, the low power wide area adoption trends. And there we see the real adoption being, well, partly as a replacement for 2G and 3G. You get 2G and 3G network switch off, you're looking for a technology to replace it. Often the focus is on those MBIoT and particularly LTE-M. Now there's also some very interesting trends happening around technology that enables IoT in a much more effective way. We talk about something called thin IoT, which is a set of functionality that's been developed effectively for IoT to use less power, to be cheaper, to have less memory requirements, all of these sorts of things. And one of the constituent elements of that is this massive machine type communications, LTE-M, MBIoT, these types of technologies. And there you can enable things like, there's some really interesting stuff happening around, say, smart labels or disposable devices. If you can bring these prices down and push up battery life, encourage a device to be able to connect for 5 years, 10 years, that kind of thing, then you can really open up some very interesting use cases, particularly if you can do it at a very, very cheap price point. So that for me is really the interesting use cases that are emerging from MBIoT, maybe not using the full capabilities of 5G, but using some of these specifically IoT related technology capabilities. With 5G IoT, we're looking in great detail as TRANSFORMA INSIGHTS as the market opportunity in terms of numbers of connected devices, amounts of revenue, all of that kind of stuff. Very granular market forecasts, and we build up these things and then we get a view on, okay, what's the size of the market. Today, in terms of pure 5G, the sort of full fat 5G, it's pretty small, maybe 1% of connected devices. And that's going to grow at a fairly regular, fairly steady rate and maybe be sort of 10% of devices. Where the really interesting stuff happens is on the massive machine type communications technologies and the amount of the market that they account for. And there we're going from perhaps 20% of devices to 80% of devices over the next 10 years. And that's a growth which goes from about, in total, about 1.5 billion to about 5 billion. So we're talking about, in terms of overall cellular connected devices, 5 billion of those connected devices, the vast majority of which will be 5G IoT, particularly, specifically, the massive machine type communications technologies. There's some really interesting things also within the roadmap for 5G in terms of some of the technology evolution and developments. Now, one which is perhaps not specifically about the technology, but is also very interesting, is about optimization. how do these technologies get used and deployed, and how are they best utilized, best deployed by the network operators to maximize their effect. And we have a lot of good work being done by the GSMA 5G IoT Strategy Working Group. We've just been talking about it in the session here at Mobile World Congress, about all of that great work that they're doing, effectively educating network operators on what the best ways are of deploying these technologies. Now, that's not maybe new technology, but it's certainly very, very relevant for making sure that those technologies are being used in a meaningful way. Now, in terms of new stuff, well, we've got a lot of stuff around non-terrestrial networks, satellite, 5G over satellite, and specifically mostly NB-IoT over satellite. The idea of providing service coverage to the underserved parts of the world, whether it be extremely rural areas or oceans and the sea. Some interesting use cases associated with that. The other one is 5G RedCap. Now, there's an evolution of this MMTC capability going on to introduce something called 5G reduced capability. That's taking full 5G, taking it down a notch or two in order to have the power benefits associated with some of those MMTC technologies, but still be part of the 5G family, still be able to deliver something close to the capabilities that 5G can deliver. Now, we've seen the first version of that just recently. I think we need to wait for a couple of iterations of that in some of the further releases of 5G before it becomes something that's really, really usable, but certainly looking interesting.